Hi, welcome to the Curious Midlife podcast, the show that brings you conversations for the multi-passionate Renaissance woman. I'm here to inspire you to create a new sense of self by daring to be creative in everything you do, and to see the world as a playground to move, explore, discover, and enjoy at any age. I help busy midlife women reclaim and increase their physical strength and confidence. Get your mojo back so you can feel brave and adventurous again and age with grace. I'm your host, Dr. Julie Angel, movement coach, filmmaker, eternal student, author of the book Breaking the Jump, and creator of the MAP system. Stay curious, creative, and strong. Enjoy the show. Welcome to this new episode, and I have the amazing Celine Yeager with me. And so I normally get people to introduce themselves, but Celine is more multi-passionate than most of us and has fingers in many pies and wears many, many hats and rides many bicycles and writes many books and does a lot of research and creates movements within social media and does a whole bunch of stuff. But in terms of, that's what I see and what I know. But Celine, if someone asks you this really tricky question, which is tricky because it's part of well, how do you identify? So, hello, welcome. Who are you? What do you do? Where's your story? Who do you see yourself as today, right now?
Right now, I am definitely the host of ep3, which is a Feisty Menopause podcast for performance-oriented women. That is my biggest hat at the moment, along with the smaller hat that fits inside of being the manager and content creator for that community on other levels. We have a membership. We have the ep3 Facebook community, which is ever growing by leaps and bounds. I create blog posts and articles for feistymenopause.com. We have a newsletter that comes out every Thursday. So that takes up a lot of my hat right now. If you had asked me 5 years ago who I was, I would have told you that I was primarily a contributing editor for Bicycling Magazine, and I raced bicycles, and I was a health and fitness writer. But the health and fitness writer and the athlete have always been the foundation of sort of everything that has sprung from that.
I love that. And also this idea that, the work that we do evolves us as a person. And as a person, we're drawn to certain types of work. And when you get to mix and mesh and mold all of those passions and interests, it all kind of becomes the same thing. So for me, it was always just creativity is the bedrock and foundation of, well, the filmmaker and the movement coach and I don't know, the dog walker, the gardener, the academic, the whatever. So when did all of your passions and interests start? So let's go back even further than 5 years ago. So were you the active kid? When did you discover that side of what movement spoke to you?
I was always an active kid in that I was always in motion, and I was sort of the oddball kid. I took to riding a bike very early, and my earliest dreams were actually me riding on a tricycle. I remember these things very well. I grew up in the Poconos in Pennsylvania, where I was not aware of the Tour de France. I was not aware that people rode bicycles for anything but fun. I didn't know people raced them. I didn't, I used it for transportation, but I wasn't yet in the urban planning space where people were talking about I just used my bicycle. And someone once described me much later on that I seem most comfortable exercising. And I don't think of it as exercise, but I am most comfortable when I am in motion. That is 100% true, which is kind of funny because I'm a writer who spends a lot of time not in motion, so those two parts of my life have always been a little at odds with each other on paper, though. I think because I am also an athlete and I exercise so intensely and for so long, I am okay with the yin and the yang of that, of also just sitting and being, with my thoughts and writing down for long stretches of time. I played field hockey in school. I did all that kind of stuff. I sort of fell away from all of it in college, even though I continued to do aerobics, play around with dance classes. It really wasn't until I got out of school and I was writing for some medical press. I did a lot of medical journalism when I got out of school. I thought I would go pre-med, and I decided that was too much school time and I didn't want to do that. So I sort of bumbled around a bit, did some medical writing, and then I discovered that there was a path where I could write about medical things for the lay public, through like a at the time there wasn't a women's health, but there was men's health. Rodale Press published all these magazines that were about bicycling and running and backpacking, and I thought, wow, that looks like a good place for me. And I applied and they rejected me, and I applied and they rejected me, and at some point they hired a headhunter who found all my resumes, I guess, and called me up and said, "You look like a good candidate." And that was probably, not even probably, that was by and large, far and away, the most pivotal point in my life, because I found all of my people, I found my purpose, I found everybody that I still work with to this day, through getting through those doors at Rodale Press. Changed my life. And they introduced me to ride, that not only could you ride bikes, but people were like, "You should try racing these things." And I was like, "Sure." And I won, and that took off another career. So that really is the was the formidable moment in my life.
I mean, it's really interesting. I think this combination of mind body, there's a lot of people who are known as writers, um, who are then, and especially they're endurance athletes. I don't know many writers who are the sprinters, the short
Hmm.
explosives, the fast twitch, and there's something about that kind of
You need endurance to write books. You
exactly,
need great amounts of endurance
exactly.
to
And
write books.
I know
Yes.
when I was doing my doctorate, and at one point I thought, doing a PhD was all about, okay, it's like this intellectual thing and you have to be clever. And then I realized, like, okay, there is a bit of that, but actually this is an endurance event.
Oh yeah. And a problem solving one. Endurance athletes have to solve problems all the time. And there's a lot of problem solving in those pursuits.
And so tell me, I didn't know about your very celebrated athletic achievements. And depending on which circles of people I'm in, if your name comes up, they'll know you either through media, or I know like different health coaches at the moment, who are like, "Oh, I know, oh my God, she's this, like amazing athlete." And then I come with my lens of like, you're just multi-passionate and you're a researcher and you move and you recommunicate information. So we all have our kind of our bias. So can you share for me and to anyone else who maybe doesn't know, and also because I think the media work you're doing for midlife women, like the Facebook groups and Feisty Media, like that is
Yeah.
blowing up right now. So people may not be aware of, well, you did all this other stuff as well. So what happened when you kind of went, oh, bicycles more than A to B, more than just me enjoying them, this racing thing,
Yeah,
what
I mean,
happened there?
I discovered an innate talent that I didn't know that I had. And, I didn't honestly, Julie, take it too seriously. Like, I enjoyed it. I did local races. I dabbled in short triathlon, did some running races. Mountain biking was a thing that I really loved, and I did some mountain biking racing. And I had a daughter. I got pregnant when I was 31. I had her at 32, and continued along that path of just sort of recreationally being an athlete. And then when I turned 38, going into 39, I decided that I would it was funny. I decided on a whim that I would do an Ironman. So I was reading Triathlete magazine, which I had done some work for at that point. And I'm reading it, and I came across an article like I would write, 16 weeks to Ironman. And I thought, I can do 16 weeks to Ironman, right? And I remember um, actually even opening my window here in my office, and my husband was outside doing something. And I'm like, I think I want to do an Ironman. And he's like, what? And I, showed him the article. And it became very clear when I started following their little 16-week program that I needed help, because even though I swam, I knew nothing about swimming. Like, I didn't have, like, it had all these drills. I didn't even know. It was like hieroglyphics to me. I didn't know what it meant. Like all these numbers and symbols. So I hired a swim coach, And she was like, well, my husband's an Ironman coach, so well, you could hire both of us. I was like, okay. And they had me send a bunch of my results and my times and this and that. And he immediately got back to me and he said, you could qualify for Kona. And I was like, wow, what? I was like, I don't want to hear that. Because I am very goal oriented. So, like, as soon as you tell me I can do something, it just captures something in my imagination and off we go. So pretty much that's what happened. 16 weeks became 10 months, and I thought they gave me a plan. I learned how to really swim, which took literally 45 minutes off of my time. Like, I learned how to swim. And I went to Kona 2008 in Louisville, Kentucky. I won my age group and I went to Kona 6 weeks later.
What's Kona?
And Kona is Ironman World Championships.
And what does an Ironman involve?
It involves a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a marathon, 26.2 run.
And I think it's fair to say people don't casually or a whim ever think about doing that. It's not a whimsical notion. Like, you can have a whim to like sign up for a 5K or a 10K, or I do know people who on a whim signed up for a marathon. But you're the first
Right.
person I've ever
I
heard
had
who's
done a marathon and I was like, I will never, ever, ever do this again unless it is on the back of an Ironman. Like, I will never train for this thing in and of itself. I just didn't like running that far that long on the pavement, especially. But, it was one of those things that, like, had I not seen that 16-week article, I probably would have been like, I don't think so. But that just was like, okay, I mean, 4 months was 4 months. And yeah, it was just another. That was also like one of those doors that opens up, because after that, I got a call from a woman who had just joined this professional mountain biking team on the East Coast, and I had raced against her and beaten her, and she had remembered that, and she said, "Would you be interested in joining this team?" And I was like, "Yeah." So that, I joined that mountain biking team and ended up racing some of the most premier mountain bike stage races in the world. There's APSA Cape Epic in South Africa, the Brazil Ride in Brazil, Israel, Cuba, BC, all over the States. I raced with multi-world champion Rebecca Rush as her teammate for a while, and wrote her book. It was just like, it was a very heady times, and I don't know that it ever has sunk in. I don't know if it is still sunk in that I raced at that level, which is why I don't talk about myself that way. I mean, I am definitely a talented woman. When I had some innate endurance talent for sure. There's no question about that. I work hard, and it came to fruition in all of these ways. And sometimes I wonder, and I've had people ask, like, oh, you could have been this pro athlete and you could have had this career. And I honestly don't know that I would have wanted that. That wasn't what I like. I'm a writer. Like, that's what I do. Like, in my heart, like, I am constantly writing in my head. Even when races were going bad, I'm like, well, at least I have a story to tell. I was quite mental about, like, the anxiety before races, and I had a lot of pressure that I would have 100% needed a sports psychologist to deal with if it was my job. Um, so I just never had that as my first identity, even though for a good 7 or 8 years, it was a large part of my identity. But it informed everything else I did. I mean, I was a writer for bicycling, so I got to test bikes and write about, I'm also a coach. So it just gave me a lot of credibility. It gave me a lot of experience. It gave me exposure. And those things just helped just build this huge platform that I have been able to then springboard off of at each phase and evolution of my professional and personal life.
I mean, I love it because from like one of my philosophies is just like it's all about just finding what you love and then do more of it. And it
Totally.
just seems you were just like I went to this thing and I loved it and I had a good time, and then there was an invitation to do this other thing, and like, okay, I'll go and do that.
That's pretty much my
Like,
life in a
okay,
nutshell. That
do this
people
thing.
question that, but that's 100%. That is 100% the way it goes. I mean, I work very, very hard, but like but I don't. And I say this to my daughter, who just turned 20, all the time. I said, if I had any one wish for you, it's that you would find something where you are never like, oh my God, it's Monday tomorrow. Or oh, thank God it's Wednesday because Friday's around the corner. Like I've never, ever, 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 ever felt that way. I don't have a ton of separation in my life between work, especially because I work at home as well. But I am 1000% okay with that because I like it's just who I am as much as what I do.
There are people who work really hard, and there are people who also have innate talent. But and it's almost self-sabotaging to have that pressure of, well, this is my identity and this is my ego. But you, like, when people say to me anything like, and I've never done anything in any kind of realm of achievement with my movement, I just enjoy it. But like the innate thing that comes out when people say like, who are you, what do you do, and I'm like, I'm an artist. And then for you it's like, I'm a writer. And when you said that, it's like, oh, I get it. I
Yeah.
get it. Like, this is, the words are your
Yeah.
craft, and everything is just this joy
100%.
around it. But the parallels of writing and movement, I think, are really interesting. And also in terms of that process of, so I wrote the book I wrote, Breaking the Jump, I wrote that whilst walking, in terms of, I wrote it in my head, and then I would go and sit down or stand up or kneel
Hmm.
down and type it. The typing was a kind of like, oh well, it has to exist. So that's my kind of like,
Right.
spit it out kind of thing. um so what's your process of how was that for, or how is that for you, and how did that change in different environments around movement, contemplation, thought, creativity, reflection?
You mean you mean
Yeah,
the
like, how does
writing
that feed into your,
process?
how you, when you're in motion?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question because I'm an early riser and I wake up with thoughts to write down. So I start sort of my brain just kicks on immediately and it literally is part of who I am. Like I don't have an explanation for that. Like it just literally is always in my head. But to answer your more direct question is that 100% I in the shower, on my bike, when I'm running. I mean, those are the three times I can think that I have like very concrete, like, oh, that's especially if I've been writing something, I'll be like, I can feel it just sort of spinning around in my head, and then it will come out in like a clear stream. And like you, like, I will stop, and now that I have these devices are amazing. Sometimes I won't even stop. Like it depends if I'm in the park, I'll just whip out my phone and talk into it because I don't want to lose it, and it's easy to lose. And I also don't want to sit there the rest of the ride trying to repeat it in my head so I don't lose it. So I will talk into it, and that is a very large part of my process. Is I ride pretty much every day, and the days I don't ride, I do something else that is physical. It's interesting too that you mentioned the endurance though. Like I have never had a thought while lifting weights. I have never, nothing has ever come to me. Nothing. I think lifting is super valuable and I enjoy doing it and I'm very present and it's important. But I have never once been like, oh, that, like, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
I never thought about that
Yeah.
before this moment.
The yeah, for me, I've really noticed the pattern of inspiration and creativity, and what nurtures them, what mutes them.
Mm,
And in terms, I'm the same in terms of like, there's 200 ideas before breakfast. It's exhausting.
yeah.
And then, after 2 p.m., I'm like, I just
Yeah,
don't
pretty much
think. And then,
power down, and then
yeah,
it's time to do
it's
something
just
else.
chill.
But that's good because you can follow the natural rhythms. That's what I like. Like I was when I first started to work at Rodale, it was hard for me, even though there was a lot of freedom there. Everybody wrote at lunch or wrote, but it was still very structured corporately. So you were really supposed to be at your desk, between 9 and 12, and really supposed to be at your desk for the rest of the day. And I was just like, this is just ludicrous. Like, it's such a waste of time. I wake up, I have ideas, I put them down, and then I go into my email phase of the day where I'm like, okay, are there any fires? Is there anything I need to like? And then I look at my schedule for the day, and I'm like, okay, I think I'll ride at this point, and I'll write this thing and it just follows my natural rhythm of the day. And when I'm out of words, I go on my bike and I make more. But you can't do that in a corporate setting that frowns upon you not being in this seat at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So I very much wanted, like, as soon as I got that job, my goal was to leave that job. And I met with all the contacts I had in the world, and it was a great time in publishing, so it was easy for me to. I had already met everybody at all these magazines, and like so many of these industries, people go all over the place. They leave and they go to other places, and if they like you, they keep you. So I was able, like, there's this one woman, Marty Munson, if you're listening, like, she's taken me everywhere with her, and I've written for 1,000 magazines because she has been at 1,000 magazines. And then you build your resume and you meet all these people. So I always I always wanted to be self-employed. It actually, when we did a career fair at college, that I have a very vivid memory of, that we were in New York and there was a woman sitting there with all these other people, and she worked for Life magazine, and she was a freelancer, self-employed, and she described her day much as I just described mine, and I was just like, I want to be that person, like that, because I don't need the discipline of somebody telling me to sit down at my desk. There's that I don't like. I will never. They're like, oh, you must watch TV. And I'm like, never in a million lifetimes am I like forcing myself to go to my computer to write. It's just not how I'm wired. I'm not sitting there playing Minecraft, putting off work. I mean, it's just not what I'm doing.
I know, and I think it's. I mean, I'm just like same. And I think that this very like industrial revolution, outdated model of work for those in the creative industries, for those in writing, for the and you kind of see these like ad agencies who are like, oh yeah, but we have table tennis, and Google has sleeping pods, and it's like, but there's kind of a little bit of leniency, but those are still seen as kind of somewhat indulgent,
Hmm.
as opposed to like, well, if this person is motivated and if this person has this kind of intellect and creativity, which are the same things, of problem solving, and then a communication of that for the good of something else, um this 9 to 5 is bullshit.
It's just,
It's
it
really,
doesn't
and it's,
exist. It's not real. Eh,
I think it's actually more than bullshit. I think it's harmful. I think it actually detracts and does the I think it repels and repulses creativity and inspiration. I don't think it just like squashes it. I think it really um, makes you allergic to those natural process of like, if I was in a writing block, I would like, I had a few different strategies. One was like eat a bar of Green and Black's 85% chocolate. So I actually became allergic to chocolate. I muscle tested allergic to chocolate after writing my book,
wow.
and it was a really crazy moment because and the person who did it, I medically I trust him with my life, and I was like, "You're a sick mother Hubbard," like, ah, and he was like, "What can I say? It's like 6 weeks again," and it worked, and it was just this. Anyway, so I would have my chocolate strategy. I would have my walk outside strategy. I would have my change location
Oh, I do
strategy.
that. I'm a big one of the changing of location. Just in my
So
house.
I would,
I leave the
yeah,
heater.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
go down to the kitchen counter. Like, I just change my, yeah, change the
But I would
music.
also change device. So I would sit in the morning and write on my laptop,
Hmm.
and then I would go to the gym and lift,
Hmm.
and I would have no creative real anything. That was just like, oh, empty time into the body, blah blah blah. And then after the gym, I'd go to a coffee shop with my iPad mini and mini keyboard, and then read, write, review the text I'd written that morning, email it back to myself, and then later in the day go back to that first laptop. So I had to have a change of location, a change of device, a body physical movement
Hmm.
in the middle to have fresh eyes, and then rinse, repeat. And this connection between mind body has always been there for me in terms of like, well, sometimes you need to just like sit it out, and other times it's just like,
Oh yeah.
just go move your body,
Yeah,
just move your
sometimes
body.
sometimes I do, like, I need to, and it's just a signal, right? Like, I can feel that the stuff is already in the brain. I'm just like having a hard time being like, okay, like, really just focus. And I actually put one of those apps on my phone that does a little alarm. So I'm not going to be like, hey, I'll just look at Twitter or Instagram for, because I am human. I am definitely willing to be like, well, I'll just scan a little longer. That I'll set it for like some random, like, 37 minutes. You will not look at anything but this page and make words for 37 minutes. And it just helps me, like, when I'm just sort of meandering and not really focused on the task at hand, like be like, all right. And then once I'm into it, I'm off and running. And when I need that, I
Cool.
pull
So
those out.
yeah, yeah. What I'm finding really productive at the moment is focused co-working sessions online with other coaches.
Mm,
So my business coach, one of her assistants, she runs these co-working sessions and it's the Pomodoro system of like you just set a timer for 20,
yep,
like you set your
yep,
intention. I'm going to achieve this in the first 25
yep,
minute
yep.
block, and it's an achievable goal. You do it, blah 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 blah. And I bash out like a month's worth of work in like 3 Pomodoro sessions.
That is cool.
and and it's like, oh yeah, cool. So just jumping in between this mind body thing. So you're at this, like, you're just really loving your movement and you're doing really, really well at it. You're at this like elite world level. You're in this movement world and but your heart is still just like, I'm a writer
Yes.
and I write about this thing and I move. So how did that movement world change, or has it changed and transition over the past like 5, 10 years? Because you said like that was kind of like 38, 39 when you got into that. Or is
Yeah.
that still happening
Well,
now?
no, I mean, so I mean that takes us to the start of my podcast because so I got picked up by that team when I was, let's say, 40. I was probably 40, and then I raced for a good 8 years. With that, taking up other kinds of races. I got into what is known as gravel now, which is not dissimilar from mountain bikes. It's more like a hybrid kind of racing where you're on um, road bike looking bikes, but with fatter tires on unpaved surfaces. Which I enjoy quite a bit. I still do that. I'm going to Montana next week for an event. Um, Somewhere, I mean, age definitely at some point, I'm just like, am I going to do this forever at this level? Like, that's untenable. But as long as I was still doing well, I was like, well, I'm still doing well. And then I hit sort of the menopause place, that menopause transition. And it was quite sudden, where I just felt like the ground had shifted underneath me. And I was not able to perform the same way. My mental state was not the same. I had anxiety beyond my usual catastrophic thinking, which I'm very good at. This was different. And I had been working with Dr. Stacy Sims, who I helped write Roar, which is a book on women's physiology and nutrition. And we had been in the process of talking about a book for 40 plus women who are going through and beyond the menopause transition, because it's such, we had included a chapter in Roar, and it quickly became evident from all the readers that that was not enough. And at the time, I didn't understand that. And once I hit that myself, I did. And, I looked around a lot of the starting lines and noticed that there were not a lot of 50-year-old women. And I started to understand why, that a lot of the things that you do don't work the same way. And, I told Stacy, I'm like, I want to write this book. I just don't know if I can because I'm a mess. So she, she gave me a lot of the advice that is now in Next Level, which is the book that is out now. But it really evolved like trying to get the cortisol and the stress down, which was sort of less time just with the volume of my training, which had been very, very high, as the kind of athlete that I was, and lifting heavy, which I had never done. I had lifted, but I had never lifted truly heavy, like 5 reps of whatever. Had never deadlifted like that. Started taking care of I started taking a few supplements. Everything is different for everyone, so I don't ever want to make it like prescriptive, but like the things that had worked for me were like ashwagandha and CBD really worked for me for that anxiety piece, and just started like piecing together a plan based on the advice for myself that made me feel like more of myself and I could sort of get my feet back under me again. And then I went out and I did a race. I was 50 that I had won the first time at 40, and I won it again. And I was very satisfied with that. And I had reached the point where I wanted to evolve from chasing podiums. So I was sort of happy to be like, okay, I don't need to chase this thing like that anymore. But now, like, what do I do with this? And at the same time, the people that Stacy was working with at the time, Feisty Media, approached me and said, hey, we want to get into the menopause space. Do you want to do a webinar? And I had been podcasting on a cycling podcast called The Paceline, and I really, really loved it. And I'd been in my mind thinking, what else can I do with this? Because I really love this. And I said, you guys need a podcast. And they said, do you want to do it? And I just said, as we've talked about before, I'm like, sure, and then like literally 3 weeks later, they're like, how about October? I'm like, oh, okay, that's quick. And, we started rolling, and I just, I just love it. I love doing it. And that has evolved from there. That is where that came from and sprung from. It was my own personal evolution around 48, 49 into 50. And yeah, it was going into our second year, 100th episode in October.
That's amazing. And I think a lot of the time we become, I mean, we're researchers. We're, the writer, the researcher, the documentary maker, just the curious midlife woman is constantly doing research, and we do more when we feel shit. When you're just kind of like, hang on a minute,
When something pushes you out of your
yeah,
comfort
and
zone,
or
yeah.
you kind of tolerate it, or you start to accept the like, yeah, well, what should I expect for my age? Or like, well, I'm pretty good for my age. And I,
Mm-hmm.
I really get bothered by that because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, I'm not into being, Peter Pan. But at the same time, I think the kind of baseline of health that people have accepted is woeful. If you're an average American, that means you're sick. That's so sad. That's awful. That's, it's just awful, I think.
And women, I'm a Title IX generation person, and like women before that, very, very, very few purposely exercised in any way, right? Like you did your hair and your makeup and you kind of wanted to look good. Like, but there wasn't until recently, you didn't have this awareness of like really participating in a physical pursuit and taking care of yourself to have that physical pursuit. And that changes everything. That changes how we what 50 looks like, right? That changes what 60. It changes everything. And it's not surprising. I mean, even like when people are like, wow, athletes are so much better, but like it wasn't that long ago that Tour de France riders smoked cigarettes. Like all this stuff wasn't that long ago, right? Like we just like our understanding of like how to best do these things is really evolving.
Definitely. And can you just explain, because to the kind of international audience, what was Title IX?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I forget sometimes. So Title IX was legislation that was passed in 1972. That was basically saying that educational opportunities provided for boys needed to also have a comparable opportunity provided for girls. But where that made a huge sea change is in sport. Especially like university and high school, you had to provide sporting opportunities for um girls and young women. So you had like all of a sudden girls running and playing sports and doing stuff that you would not have had before,
Yeah,
and getting scholarships to do so.
and that's crazy. Like it's just so wild to think like seriously, like that generation, the generations before us, like they weren't invited to move.
Well, not only not invited. I mean, we just did if people want to check it out, Feisty Media, I did two of the interviews, but it was cool. Like all the podcast hosts under Feisty Media's umbrella did interviews for a show that we called Nine, the Voices of Title Nine. So it's 9 different episodes. And it is like these women who were like literally tackled and prevented from doing, like the marathon. Yeah. Like crazy, like not just not encouraged or invited, but actively discouraged from doing it.
Yeah,
So it's, yeah,
it's crazy.
prohibited.
And I think I actually don't know what the European history is, but what comes up when I think about it, it's like, well, during World War II, women, were running the ammunition factories. Women were
Oh, they
running
were
the
here too,
farm.
Rosie the Riveter, but then she had to go back and like, okay,
Yeah,
you can put down that big heavy machine now, and like, yeah.
yeah. So it's always kind of interesting, and in the kind of history of physical education in Europe, I know the work that Georges Herbert did. Um, his wife, because I speak with his grandson, and he was like, "Well, no, my grandmother was doing it as well." So there were physical education programs written for women, coached by women, that were definitely happening in Europe at the beginning of the 1900s.
Hmm.
But then, yeah, it just kind of gets lost, and weird stuff gets normalized, and all of those things. So, yeah, so Feisty Media, it's
Yeah.
big. and your work got
It is
personal,
big.
and that's always cool. And also, tell me, like, how do these collaborations work? So I know when I'm kind of filming someone or learning from someone, um, but in terms of the research, like, how does that work? Because for the layperson, to understand the biochemistry of perimenopause and menopause, it's like, hang on a minute, like, I need to go and do some anatomy 101. I need to go and understand this and that. And I think your role is this um, translator to work
Yes.
with those medics. So what can
Yeah.
you speak just a little bit to how you found that, or were you so predisposed and in your kind of medical research training because you
Yeah, I mean, because I started there, right? Like, I started in medical publishing, which literally like infectious diseases in children and orthopedics today. Like I was writing for those and going to medical conferences. And so yeah, I have spent so much time translating medical research for the lay public. It's just part of my brain at this point. So when I saw Stacy presenting at a USA cycling conference, because I'm also a coach, so I have many certifications in training and coaching, and you have to do continuing education to keep up with that. So I'm always have one hand in the research pot, always. But when I saw her present, I was like, that woman needs a book. And she was comfortable with me doing it because she knew that she could just give it to me the way she would give it to her PhD students. And I would be able to be like, what are you really saying here? Like, and be able to tell, because that's the hugest part of what I do with Feisty Media in general, is I'm like, what does this mean for you? What does it, in very plain language, what is it saying? What are the mechanisms? What should you do? And that's just, I synthesize information and I bring it back out in a way that is digestible to, I hope, pretty much anybody that captures
oh, you do, and you're great at it, and I celebrate it,
it.
and I think that that bilingual capacity and skill set is really really important because
Well, my brother's an FBI scientist, so I think it
oh,
just
there
kind
you
of
go.
runs in the, yeah, I think it just kind of runs in the family.
Because yeah, you are. It's detective work. Well, what does the lay person think? What does the lay person know? Because when you're just in the echo chamber of knowledge, you can talk the same language. Like if you're around a
Yeah,
bunch of academics, like the word, there's an allergy and an ology stuck on the end of every other word. But then
yeah,
it's like, well, okay, go and explain it to your grand, or explain it to your neighbor, who's not into any of that, who just goes, well, what do you mean? Because I thought that was that, and so there's a lot of myth busting that has to
yeah.
happen. Um, so where do you see? I mean, number one, can you just give a quick overview of Next Level?
Next level.
Yeah.
Next level is a book for it. It's Dr. Stacy Sims' research work. I also, she gives me all of what she has done in this space about like everybody knows. Well, I won't even say that because it's not true. A lot of people don't know what menopause actually is. They know at the very basic level that menopause is the cessation of your periods, right? It's when you've had your last menstrual period and you're not getting your period anymore. But what most of us don't know, and I'll just say that because I didn't know until I started digging into that, is what the loss of those ovarian hormones really means to you. Like, what does estrogen do in your body? What does progesterone do in your body? And why, when they start fluctuating and declining, do you experience all of these symptoms? And without that knowledge, you can think you're losing your mind.
Hmm.
I mean, and a lot of women do. So the first part of Next Level is all about that. Like, meet estrogen. This
Hmm.
is everything
Look what
estrogen
she's been
does. Let's
doing.
meet.
Isn't she
Right, a
amazing?
whole
She's
lot. Kind of a
great.
drama queen, but
Yeah.
she's really great. Meet progesterone, her friend. And you just sort of like get into it, and then like that. So many women have told me that alone is just so helpful for them because then they can go, oh, well, that's why I'm feeling this way. Like your brain calms down when you understand like something, even if it doesn't change, it just turns down the temperature of the water, right? Like even if you're still experiencing this thing, understanding it is huge. Being able to name it is huge. And then we go into like and Next Level does definitely go through an active woman's, performance minded woman's lens. So it is, even though I do firmly believe that everyone can benefit from the lifting heavy and doing a lot of the exercise recommendations that we have in there, it is performance oriented in many ways. Like if you still want to do your CrossFit and all of this stuff, these things will help you. But it is a guide to staying active and staying strong and mitigating a lot of these symptoms with or without hormone therapy. Stacey is not a giant fan of hormone therapy. She's not against it, but she thinks there's many ways that, that you can live your life without it. And yeah, so that the book is pretty much all about that.
And what are the ripples that you've seen happening?
I can't even believe it. Like I can honestly, like you get, I've written a lot of these things and I get tremendous amount of anxiety in the months before. My poor husband this one was killing me because, when we did Roar, there was nothing like it, and Stacy was a very well-known researcher but did not have a quote unquote platform, right? She had 200 followers on Instagram. Like she was a scientist. But now she's got 120,000 followers on Instagram and is cited all over the place, and Roar has been a bestseller, and I'm just like, it was so anticipated. I just wanted to hide in a closet and not come out. It was about like the second album, you know what I mean? Like, oh, we did this thing that was
Yikes.
successful, and now, and when you write something, at least me, I hate the thing. By the time it's ready to be published, I hate it. Like I've seen it so many times. I think it sucks. I'm like, what have I even done with the past year and a half of my life? I get to that place, which is the worst state of mind to be in when this book is going to come out. But there it is. So I hide. I don't look at reviews for a while. I put on a happy face and I do all the publicity. But I cannot believe it cracked. I want to say the top 100 on USA Today's list of best-selling books, which is for a menopause book for active women, is amazing to me. It continues to be one of the best sellers on Amazon. I mean, I get, it's just, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. Like it got into the Peloton community, and now it's sort of like, we had like 500 women come into our community in a day, and just from the Peloton, and the Hip Play Not Pause group I was talking about. And I was like, where are these women coming from? And they're all like, we're from Hardcore on the Floor. They're all from like all these, but it's just, it's been phenomenal. It's been, humbling and heartwarming and all those great things all at the same time. I'm so, I don't use the word proud much, but I am very proud of making that, uh helping make that happen. I always like, somebody would have found Stacy. I'm glad that I found her when I did, and I'm super honored that she trusts me with this and that I am able to be part of something that is having such an important impact on so many women.
I mean, it's a legacy project. It's a piece of work that um, that is important and it's of its time. And I think that relationship of trust is huge because that whether that person is, your informant in, if you're doing an anthropological project, or they're you're
Right.
like, the research is the baby. It's their knowledge. This is their like, this is my belief system, and it's what I say of what I understand at this moment in time. And you can only write, we only know what we know. And
Totally.
yeah, by the end of the book, like you're just bored. You're bored of the book. Like you've done so much reflection on every statement, on every sentence. Everything's been double checked.
And you still miss a typo. Can I just
Oh
tell you? Like
fucking
that's
hell!
the
Every
that right?
time.
That is the worst thing. 7 people have read it 12,000 times and you're like, really, did we all miss this thing? I have a list. It's not long, but it's just
It's
like,
there.
it makes me
I
crazy.
know, and it's
But
I
somebody, a writer on the internet, I saw it on Twitter. She's like, I have a new appreciation. She's like, those typos are heroes. They have been able to rise. She's like, I have so much appreciation for the journey that they had to make. I'm like, I'm gonna look at it that way because my God,
I think they're the human footprint of the book. They're the human footprint
yeah,
that
that's a good way
says,
to look at
you
it.
know, there's been all these eyes. There's been the writers. There's been the editors. There's been the copy editors.
Copy
The editors.
editors,
The whole
the top editors.
yeah. So I don't know how it was for you or how it is for you with your writing, because you're, my brief forays into writing have been like, writing's really hard. Like I like it, but it's really, really hard. And all I do when I finish a big writing project is I don't want to write. I have thoughts that are good that I want to share, but the idea of like a big writing project. So how is it for you in terms of these bigger projects, like the book projects versus the smaller projects? Like big deadlines, little deadlines.
Yeah. I mean, clearly when you're done with a book, like it is an exhausting process. And it's funny, funny not so funny, but when the when the pandemic started, I panicked because I knew that it was going to be big.
Hmm.
I knew it was going to be bigger than a lot of people were
Hmm. Hmm.
thinking. And I started worrying about the economic impacts of it. And I was just like, I am a self-employed person who holds down a lot of this house.
Hmm.
And I signed 3 book contracts, including that one, right at the gate. And then I'm like, and now I have to write them.
It's like, yeah, good
And
news,
now,
bad news.
so, and it was I finished that. It's funny, like this year has been um the only time that I've just been like, whew, I don't know. When it comes to, like, I had put down books for a while when after writing a bunch, because I'm like, they're big projects, they're great paychecks, but it's exhausting, and I picked them back up. And now this is the first time in quite a while where like you, I'm just like, we're going to sign a contract to do an update to Roar, which is in desperate need of updating. So I'm like, that's not a full book. The book already exists. It has its framework, so I'm not looking at it like a book. There's another woman that's been sort of knocking on the door to write a book with her, and I was just like, I can't lift heavy right now with books, but if you're willing to do most of the heavy lifting, I will help you. I always keep the small projects in rotation because they use different parts of my brain, and you can knock them out more easily. I also do. I still write for bicycling here and there. I just did a feature for them. Like, I like having different things to occupy my thoughts. So when I'm working on one thing, the other one is sort of marinating on the back burner, and it's more ready when I bring it forth, to work on it again. So yeah, I mean, it is really just moving things around on the stovetop, right? Well, one thing is in the oven, and I think it is a lot like cooking in that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I love actually the cross pollination between projects that maybe don't
Hmm.
have that obvious connection, but then everything's
Totally.
connected. Our brain's always bubbling and humming and like, oh, maybe, oh, that thing that, oh, like you're
Yeah.
like a little kind of like, oh, sparkly thing, oh, nice thought, oh, oh, that applies to that. That's an analogy of that. That's a metaphor. Oh, yeah. Boom. Ah, oh, okay, that's the sentence. Yeah, boom. Get it out of your brain. Da 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 da.
Yep.
So managing a very large, growing, popular social media site. Social media is a
It's
funny
hard.
one.
Hmm.
How is it? What are the challenges? What are the things you
What?
love?
Honestly, well, I mean, it's exciting, and I'm super appreciative to everybody who's in there. The number one hardest thing for me is absorbing the angst and the sadness.
Hmm.
Like, because
Yeah.
a lot of the women who are coming in are struggling with the
Hmm.
changes, with the symptoms, with the things, and it's heavy, and it can
Yeah.
be very heavy, and I am an incredibly empathetic person. So it's really hard for me not to absorb them, and I struggle with that. Like, and I've been very honest, with my husband. We've had that. I'm like, that is the hardest part about this, and that is the part I struggle with. I'm fairly good at compartmentalizing. Like, when it's time to sort of put that down, I'm able to put it down, but I have to live with it a lot because it's part of my job. It's part of what I do. So that is the hardest part for sure. And what's really lovely about the community, in Hit Play Not Pods, is that they are by and large very supportive of each other,
Yes.
and it's a very positive
Yes.
community, and it's a very positive forward facing community because they are, they're athletes by and large. They're very active people. So they're already sort of proactively doing this thing and taking care, and they have that mindset. So it does make it somewhat easier. But I take this stuff really seriously, and I take everything I put out into the world very seriously. And I the weight of that responsibility sometimes is a bit much, because I want it to be clear and accurate and useful and engaging and all the things. It's sort of like I was talking about the book. Like it's a lot more than people realize. Like
Hmm.
even putting together one social media post
Hmm.
is a lot more than people realize. They're just scrolling and they engage or they don't engage for a moment. Um, they just have no idea the machinations that have gone on to put that out into the world.
I think, yeah, if you're a conscious content creator where you're creating content that has to have value, that it has to go through your set of filters, which are, yeah, but why does this matter? What is relevant? What is the what is there to gain, or what is the purpose of me creating this? Am I posting for posting, or is there, do I know my why? What is the why behind me sharing this
Hmm.
information and
And is it
releasing it?
correct? I'm going, and when I'm talking about medical studies and talking about like getting that information, like that's really important to me. I get because I know that if something is not correct, I am going to hear about it,
Mhm.
and I have no problem. Like I have. There's very little that you can say either online or in a DM to me that will flop me a whole lot. Like I'm very good at engaging with people, even when they're angry or they're upset. Just like, okay, like let's talk about that. And most of the time, people are like, "Oh, hey, thanks. Let's talk about it," because they just want to be heard. Most people just want to be heard.
I think so. And yeah, to be seen and heard and to have what, where they feel is a safe space to do that, because the problems with menopause are a lot of things that are very vulnerable shares for
Yeah,
people, whether it's their mental health or vaginal dryness or all of those
totally.
things. These are things that maybe they don't have other spaces to share, or they're used to very kind of small, intimate spaces. But then what's amazing with this group is that this safe, intimate place to share is also now quite a big space,
It's got 16,000 people in it, so
which is
yeah,
amazing,
it's
and also I think
yeah,
what I really respect and appreciate is that, and I think because you've been around scientists and you've been around researchers, that when information is wrong, it doesn't mean the person is wrong.
right.
And there has been, so much noise around questioning science, and it's like, that's what we should be doing. Like, that's
Science is supposed to question science. Scientists,
exactly.
that's the number one job of scientists, honestly, is like to prove themselves wrong or to find holes or like evolve. Like it's never settled. It's never, ever, ever settled. And I know that's very frustrating for women, and we are always, for everybody, let's be clear, it's frustrating for everybody. But we're always presenting like that is honestly the most challenging part of what I do. Like it's interesting because I spent a whole lot of time writing a whole lot of bullshit, and I'm not going to do that anymore. Like writing the weight loss stuff that was based on crap, right? Back in the 90s, and looking at that with great remorse. I have a lot of remorse, like that. If I don't have a lot of regrets in my life, and it's hard to say like I totally regret that because it was an instrumental part of my career, but I, I am very careful. I will not just perpetuate that stuff anymore. I just won't. And um
I,
yeah, so it takes work.
but we only know what we know when we know it. And I was recording a podcast with Courtney Townley yesterday, and she was saying, yeah, she used to be a weight loss coach, like 20 years ago, like that same era, and she's just like, it's wrong, but I had to do it, and I had to be wrong so that I could evolve. And
Yeah,
and now it's more
but
than
now
that.
I'm louder than ever about
Yeah,
like that
yeah,
topic.
yeah. It's what excites you about future research at the moment? Because things are going like at an exponential speed in terms of like the neuroscience, the bioaging, the health span, the biohackers, the like, what are you drawn to? What are you kind of staying away from? Or I don't know, what's exciting you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I continue to learn. I think that what's really interesting right now to me is that, all the, I just was talking to a woman about the femtech and about tracking. Like, I think that you can get into trouble tracking every little thing, right? Like, I'm a very intuitive person, so I'm not really about that, but I do think that numbers can support your intuition in ways that are interesting. Like, I find like the Aura ring and the Whoop straps and the stuff that you can really like look at, just see what's going on underneath the surface, I find super, super interesting. And that is only going to get more evolved, right? Like, that kind of research is only going to get more evolved. So that is exciting. I find just, women, it's a really, really great time to be a woman in sport,
Hmm.
and like that's very exciting, just watching like that genie's not going back in the bottle, right?
No.
Like, and it's only going to get better and better. So like that kind of stuff, and watching like older women in sport, which
Yes.
is very exciting.
I think we haven't even really begun to see the potential there.
I agree with that 100%. Oh yeah, no
And
doubt.
and there was one study I read, and I can't remember what it was, but the thing that always stayed in my mind was you can build muscle up until age 98. And it was like, well, there you go. Which isn't to say you're going to be 98 and, kind of, oh, leaping around. But in terms of the sedentary population or anyone thinking like,
Right.
oh, I'm in my 80s or I'm in my
Oh no,
70s,
no, no, no. Yeah, they do those studies
you
that
know,
you can,
you can
yes.
turn this stuff around.
And muscle is real important.
Hmm.
It's very important.
It's the one, like in all the longevity community, they're just like muscle,
Muscle. It comes
muscle.
up again and again. Every podcast I listen to that talks
Yeah.
about any of that, muscle, muscle, muscle. It's so
But
important.
then it's confusing because you have the nutrition people, and some are like, "Yay, protein! No protein! Yay, animal protein! No vegetable protein!"
Oh my god, nutrition. There's so many reasons for that, and the bulk of it being nutrition research is such a mess. It's hard to do. It's just really hard to do. So much of it is epidemiological or observational, dietary records. Like, it's so hard to do good nutrition research, and then it's really hard. So
It's
yeah.
it's an interesting one. So what's happening next with your movement? What are the fun things that are happening in your life right now?
No, it's really the same stuff. Like, I continue to ride my bike and love riding my bike. That I don't think that will ever get old for me. I think because bikes evolve and the places you can ride evolve, and you can always go new places. I mean, if you want to talk about things I'm having fun with, I have a tonal. Do you know what a tonal
I do
is?
not.
It is so amazing. So, a tonal it looks like sort of a wall mounted full length mirror without the reflection, and it's got two arms that articulate, like two that come out and have different attachments you can put on pulleys or a bar, that kind of thing. And it is a digital weight system. So inside, behind the magic mirror
Hmm.
thing, is a weight system that you go through an assessment, and it puts you through. It creates resistance, puts you through some exercises, sets weight for you, and then you do all these pre-programmed programs with all these different coaches. Um, it automatically adjusts as you get stronger, and it remembers what you've done, and it's amazing. It
Wow.
is. I love that thing so much, I can't even tell
It
you how
sounds
much I
like a
love it.
home
I
robot.
It is amazing. But the thing I love most about it is that it literally just slides right into my life, because I going to the gym, even though the gym is really close to me, is going to be an hour no matter what I do,
Hmm.
at least, because I have to change, I have to get in the car, I have to go there, I have to do the things, I have to gather all the weights and change the weights and go across the gym and try to remember what did I do on this last time and go on my phone and check. But this is just like I can literally put on a pair of shorts, go into the next room, hit a button, and in 27 minutes I'm 100% done.
Wow.
And yeah, I don't use the word game changing often or life altering, but it has been for both my husband and I, just life altering.
It's
Like, I use
efficient.
it every day in the winter time.
Hmm.
Every day. It's got yoga classes, it's got all kinds of stuff. It's got yeah, it's just it is remarkable.
Wow.
It is remarkable. So that has been, I have found that when you talk about what I'm excited about as far as movement, I love that thing.
Cool. And where are the next bike rides? Where are the next, like, are you race? Is there a
I'm
race
going to
season?
Montana next week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Montana Glacier National Park. I'm very excited about that.
And are you seeing as many, or are you seeing, how many women of our age are you seeing out riding at a,
There's quite a few.
yeah.
There's quite a few. Yeah. Um, it does vary by, at least in the US and probably everywhere. It varies by region, but there is still, like, women are pouring into these events, especially gravel events, because um they're not strictly races in their execution. I mean, they're very much like, if you want to race, you can get up in the front and race, but 90% of people are not racing. 90% of people are competing, not completing the event. So there's super fun aid stations where you can stop and you can get, like, a burrito and take pictures, and it's just like, it's more of just a social challenge. I mean, they're still hard, but they're not it's not the same as, like, road racing, where you would have to have a team and everyone's competing, or what's the point. It's not like that. So they take place in beautiful places like Glacier National Park, and you do this stuff. So there's tons of women at these events, which is nice to see, and tons of women of all ages at these events.
That's always great. And just kind of wrapping
And I
up.
love stand-up paddleboarding. I'm sorry, I knew there
Oh,
was one thing
tell
I
me, tell me. I find this
yeah.
sounds maybe weird, but I find it really boring. I like it, but I find it boring. Unless
There
I'm
is nothing that
discovering.
quiets my mind like that. I love it. Like, the moment I float out onto the water, something just, like, washes down on me. That doesn't happen with anything else I do.
I spend a lot of time in water and next to the water. So, and there's something about when I'm next to water, I want to be in the water as opposed to always
Yeah,
on top of the
I
water.
like being on the water. I like to be in the water too, but I feel like I can see, because we have a lot of, like, eagles and
Mm-hmm.
osprey and turtles, and so I feel like I'm just sort of like in a
It's dreamy.
wildlife video.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's just like there's something in a terrarium or something. Like, it's a different. There's nothing quite like it for me. It really
that's nice.
calms me down, and I love the which I think you'll appreciate. I love what it does for my feet.
Oh, yes, there's a
Like,
nice balance
yeah,
thing happening there.
yeah, that I
There's
can
no
feel,
claws.
like,
It should be like,
yeah, well, yeah, and it's the proprioception
yeah.
on the feet that I think every time I do it, I'm like, this has got to be really good for you, because I know they've done a lot of those studies about people who fall, and when they're older,
Hmm.
and, like, they lose the proprioception and then all that in their feet, and how important that is. I'm like, this is really, anyway, but yeah, so
That's
I'm into
cool.
that too.
No, I love it. And where can people find your work? Where do people know more?
Well, they should go to feistymenopause.com to find, like, all of the stuff that we've talked about, mostly because you can find the blog, you can find the podcast, you can find all of my work there is right at feistymenopause.com. It's like one-stop shopping. Um, yeah, that's pretty much where you'll find most of what I do these days.
Cool. And if there were a couple of things you were to say to someone listening into this who maybe wants to be more active, maybe thinks like, oh, but I'm just this or whatever. What words or final thoughts for the curious midlife woman would you share?
I don't know if it directly relates to that, but the thing that I talk about most when people ask me a question like that is, I always say, like, live forward. Like, that has sort of become my mantra, because I think it can become incredibly easy to get to a certain point, whatever that point is for you, whether it's menopause or an age like 50 or 60, where you start spending a lot of the time with your head over your shoulder, looking backwards, or looking in the rearview mirror at everything you have done and not everything yet to do. And you still have so much life ahead of your feet, and there's so many things you can do, and not that those things that you have done are not significant, of course they are, but use them as a ladder or a mountain that you've been climbing to keep going. Like, think it's there's a lot you can still do, and You can reinvent yourself countless times.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. And thank you for the work you do. Thank you for being
Yeah.
you. Thank you for being the the
Thank you.
person in motion who writes and translates and has the capacity to take the information and present it in a way that wouldn't get an airing, and to, to help share a spotlight on, I think, this really important legacy work, which is going to be transformational, not just for women, but I think for the medical profession, who just haven't been
I
looking
hope
at
so.
stuff. So just as one person, just to say thank you so much, and thank you for your time today.
No, I appreciate you too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show. Remember to subscribe and leave a review, and let me know what resonated, what you liked, what it brought up, what you're curious about, and what you would like to hear. You can go to julieangel.com and you will find a bunch of great free resources there. There is the free Move More course, your free Movement Snacks guide, and if you are interested in reclaiming and increasing your physical strength and confidence so you can get your mojo back, be brave, adventurous, and age with grace, then message me via social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, or through my website, or email me at drjulieangel@gmail.com. That's drjulieangel@gmail.com, and let's set up a call. And until the next time, enjoy, stay curious, and I'm glad you enjoyed the show.